Hello and welcome. We're going to give people just a few minutes to get started, to jump in before we get started. So thank you so much for being here, and we'll be on in just a couple minutes. Okay, I think we have most everybody here. We might have a few more people trickling in, but let's get started since we're at the top of the hour. Again, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. I am your host, Shelley Mann, the VP of Marketing at Zia Consulting. And in today's webinar, Volker Blasek from AccuPro, and Jeremy White from Zia Consulting are going to discuss and demonstrate how your organization can leverage SAP archiving and document management with AWS S3 and SharePoint for optimized performance, cost efficiency, compliance and risk mitigation, streamlined operations, and scalability for future-proofing to remain agile and ready for this rapidly changing landscape. Together, they bring decades of experience and deep familiarity with the challenges that people face. Before we get started, I want to let you know that we'd prefer for you to put the questions in the comments, and we'll get to those at the end. And also let you know that you're going to receive a link to this webinar after the session is over today. So with that, I'd like to turn this over to our presenters, Jeremy and Volker. Thank you so much.
Jerry, you have to unmute. It's still muted.
That would be helpful. So yeah, just was kind of starting off here by thanking Shelley for hosting us, and also a warm welcome and thank you to Volker Blasek, who's the CEO of AccuPro, for joining us today to walk through the presentation. I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself and just give a couple of minutes of background, and then I'll ask Volker to do the same, and then we'll jump straight into the deck here. So again, my name is Jeremy White, and I look after the SAP practice as well as the cloud and managed services practice here at Zia Consulting. I have a long history kind of sort of attached to SAP. I started my career on an SAP implementation in the 90s at a very large food manufacturing and production company called ConAgra Foods. It was a very old R2 version, and one of the things that we quickly ran into were a lot of issues related to the performance of SAP due to the amount of data that we had in the system, and also trying to determine how we were going to archive that data. So yeah, it's 25 years later, still doing the same thing. Interesting, these problems are still there. The good news is we've got really simple and elegant solutions to, and methods that we can solve those problems. So yeah, looking forward to today's discussion. Volker, did you want to go ahead and take a couple minutes and introduce yourself?
Sure. So also thank you, Shelley and Jeremy, for letting me be here in this webinar. So Volker Blasek, coming from Germany, close to SAP, and I started my career all about SAP archive integration. So I do it also for 25 years. And you're right. So we stay with a very similar approach that we have to get document content around the SAP environment. And this is really something that is simply on my roadmap. Did this for different companies, also for different content management systems. But at the end, the one constant thing is always I integrate with SAP. And this you will see today.
Thank you very much, Volker. So just by way of a a quick kind of agenda outline and talk through what we'll see today. We're not going to spend a lot of time on the company overview and promotions. We just kind of want to jump straight into this and give you the details on what the solution does, and then also plan to have Volker walk us through a live demonstration. So yeah, we'll just take a couple minutes, go through company overview, some of the quick benefits associated with SAP archiving, and then we'll jump into the more specifics around the AccuLink product and the product offering, and then the demonstration. And then, as Shelley said, we'll open up the session at the end for questions and answers. So throughout the presentation, feel free to go ahead and put those, I believe it's in the chat box, and Shelley will keep track of those. And towards the end of the presentation, we'll go ahead and open it up. So just by way of a quick introduction to ZIA, we are a company that's been around for just over 20 years now, founded in Boulder, Colorado. A lot of our kind of original projects were related to capture of content, the management of that content, and then we quickly scaled to become a full enterprise content management system that focuses on all of the aspects from inception of content all the way through governance and disposition. And that quickly kind of, snowballs when you look at some of the line of business applications and even the enterprise applications like SAP. Content in those repositories follows the same practice, right? Needs to be an enterprise content management strategy as well as a governance, archival, and disposition strategy. So that's kind of what we'll be focusing on today, is content management and archive disposition related to SAP content. We have a pretty high success rate with our customers, so 95% retention rate, proven track record. Most of our customers come back and want to talk to us about additional projects and how we can continue to evolve their technology platforms to meet their evolving business needs. So we have a whole kind of toolkit of solutions that we can bring to bear and work with our customers to continue to help evolve these solutions to meet their needs and future-proof their investments in those applications. So that's a brief overview of ZIA, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to Volker to talk a little bit more about AccuPro. Volker, now you
unmute myself now. So AccuPro is a company that you have heard before already. We really focus on the SAP integration. That's why we are 100% focused. And we have there a lot of experience, 25 years of, or even more of this one, seeing really the whole history. You start with R2, as you said, Jeremy. So very similar to me. Also, we saw the archiving around SAP with Warm, DVD, everything, Centera, and now up to the latest ECM systems that we are talking today. So online storage and cloud storage, as well as these ECM systems. So our mission is really to bring our knowledge in this very niche. Yes, it's a niche, but this is exactly where we are focused on, and there we can help you to really get your SAP system in a shape that you can run it cost efficient, as well as you bring together your content with your SAP information. And yeah, later on you will see how we do it and where we can support you to get most success out of your SAP system environment.
Very good, thank you. Yeah, and before we jump in, I wanted to talk about 3 promotions that we have going on, and these will come to more light as we go through this presentation. But the 2 that we'll be talking about specifically today are the 2 products that Volker will be covering. So one of them is with Amazon Web Services S3, and the other one is with SharePoint. So Volker, did you want to talk a little bit more about these 2 promotions and kind of what's included in these options?
So the cool thing about this one is that AccuLink is one container that you run in your environment, wherever you like. So we will deploy this container in your environment, and we make the access to one of your systems, S3, to SharePoint, you name it, maybe to both, because we don't care to which system we connect. So we will make this available in your system environment with your SAP system. So that's the idea, that you really get a feeling how fast we are, that we can do this completely in your SAP standard environment. And yeah, that this is typically not a thing where you get nervous about, because it's a straightforward implementation, and not sometimes you hear SAP, whoa, it takes months. No, we do this fast. And this is exactly what is behind this one. That's why we say we trust that we can implement in hours to days, and you can test it. That's it.
Thanks, Volker. Yeah, so we're pretty excited about this. The concept here, as Volker said, is non-billable engagement. So we want to work with you. There's just a couple of prerequisites, but the concept is non-billable engagement to essentially allow you to kind of try it before you buy it. So working with you to install the software and the integration in one of your lower environments, configure a couple of document types, and really give you the opportunity to provide or to have access to this and prove this out in your landscape. The third thing that we have here is the non-billable return on investment analysis. So once again, this is a non-billable exercise that we will happily undertake with you. Just a couple of things that we do here, a couple of pieces of information that we collect from you. And what that allows us to do is put together a cost-benefit analysis associated with deploying one of these solutions. So this is one from a previous customer, and I won't go into too much detail here, but if you look at the key at the top, basically this top line that you're looking at, this is SAP in a HANA environment based on their current repository size and with their projected growth without any archiving solution. And then what you'll see down here at the bottom line is using an archive solution like AccuPro for S3 or SharePoint, what the cost of that solution is. And then essentially the middle, the blue line, is the total cost. So that's the cost with HANA, as well as the full cost of the solution built in together. So this is something, again, we're willing to undertake this with you, non-billable. This is a really quick assessment as well. In most instances, we can turn around the analysis working with you in less than 48 hours. That way we can kind of start the discussion of, does it make sense to go ahead and do a prototype and prove this out in your environment. So yeah, at the end of the presentation, I think the last slide here, we have both of our email addresses. So certainly as we go through the presentation, think about these couple of topics and reach out to us after the webinar today, and we'd be happy to discuss this with you in more depth and how we can work with you on these. So just quickly, I'm going to run through some of the benefits of archiving. For the folks who are using SAP, these are not going to require any discussion. You are already familiar with these. Part of the problem, that we see with SAP and when we allow data to bloat in SAP is it impacts the performance. The issue associated with HANA and the way that the HANA license is based on 64 gigabyte RAM units, because this is in memory, and the cost associated with that, it becomes pretty expensive and pretty unreasonable from a performance perspective pretty quickly. So the benefits really are, reducing costs and also improving performance. The first one that we're talking about here from an ROI perspective is, once we associate the cost, and I'm just going to jump back to this slide, what you'll see here at around this 3-month to 4-month mark is that the application and the implementation services, the managed services, etc., they've already paid for themselves at around the 3 to 4 month mark. So what that means is, in most instances, customers can use existing budget instead of going to get new budget, meaning the spend was already going to happen with SAP or with the addition of additional storage requirements, etc. And in most instances, we can save money and reallocate that budget and provide you with a very solid return on investment in 6 months or less. So pretty excited about that, and we'll talk more about that as well. Some of the other things, that are pretty typical with the performance are, again, just related to the bloat of the database, as well as the table space requirements. When you look at all of the columns that are required, that are consuming table space and how much time that adds to transaction time, what we can do is reduce that by migrating data the transactional data over to the repository. Therefore, it streamlines database performance. The other thing is really around the backup and recovery time associated with HANA. So again, the more that we can kind of skinny up the database, skinny up the size of the database, this leads to improved performance as well as recovery times associated with the environment. And then lastly here on benefits is there's, some of the reason that we want to get the data over to an external environment is to provide external access to that data. So in many instances, you might have use cases out at distribution centers, et cetera, or even with remuneration statements where a user doesn't actually need access to SAP. They just need access to a couple of pieces of documents or data inside of SAP. So the idea is to provide that access external to SAP. And again, one of the benefits is we can limit the number of licenses required on the SAP platform, which are quite costly. And then the last thing I'll talk about here before kind of turning this over to Volker is by leveraging ZIA and our managed services offering, we containerize the implementation. We also provide the patches, upgrades, and support for the implementation. And we can continue to build services on top of those containers, those external containers. So if you need service to some of the content outside of SAP, so for example, in one of the AWS S3 buckets, we can continue to evolve with your use cases and we can continue to provide you with solutions to those requirements. And so that's really around the future proofing for growth by leveraging ZIA application managed services. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Volker, and I'll go ahead and drive the presentation. Volker, I think I'm going to keep driving it, so you just let me know when you want the next slide. And I'm going to go ahead and kind of skip right past this. This is just sort of the different options that we have for managed services, whether or not we deploy the AkiPro solution on-premise, in your cloud, in one of the public clouds, or in the ZIA cloud. So all of those are covered and dependent upon what your requirements are. So thank you. And yeah, without further ado, let me go ahead and bring Volker back in and we'll jump into the deck here.
Thanks, Jeremy. So let me share my screen and I can directly
Excellent.
Okay. Move forward. So yeah, just a few words before we start with the demo. So what are we talking about? Let me bring this back to your mind. So SAP is built of business objects. So you have hundreds, thousands of different business objects. And typically to these business objects, you have related information. So when we talk about documents, so in these documents, to handle them in relation to the SAP business objects, that's one part that I want to talk today about. And this is, I think, one area where we are very strong. And you see that with Aquilink, we make this happen to connect, for example, S3, so the cloud storage or SharePoint or others. So we can connect to other systems also. But keep in mind, that's one thing. Documents related to SAP business objects and all the advantages we will see later on. And the second thing, of course, is about data archiving, which Jeremy already mentioned. So your SAP database is growing. You have big table spaces. And of course, over the years, it's simply growing. And at some point, you should get rid of this old information because it makes a high complexity, high costs of managing all the things. And this is the second part I want to talk about, the data archiving. So document and data archiving. And when we talk about archiving, we have here this different kind of storages that you might have around in your environment. A little bit more technical, the introduction, and then you see here to make this happen, you have to integrate to SAP, obviously. And SAP is a standard system. I'm a fan of it because it's, for me, the most complex system with less problems typically occurring. And therefore, SAP has implemented very well implementation strategies. Therefore, we have, on the one hand, the so-called content server protocol that is used to link content to business objects, to exchange content between these two worlds. So just, content can be transferred. And in addition, not only content, so documents can be transferred, but also data. So for example, from your SAP system, you grab the data from the table spaces, you create an external flat file, and this flat file then is stored in a secured place, which then can be accessed again in SAP. So again, that's the SAP data archive approach. And you can do this via our integration layer, Aquilink. And then you see another integration that is using HTTP, HTTPS, RFC calls, typically RFC, or the later version, not version, but later integration option is via OData. This is for data exchange, meaning very often we have here content that we store to the SharePoint S3 environment, and always SAP is the leading system, obviously, because here we have the index information. We have all information there, we find it, no doubt. But sometimes it might be interesting to make this SAP relevant content also available for others in your portal, for your users, whatsoever. So it might be sensible to get here also some information from SAP stored on the document layer. And this is something we do here with this additional integration option. Here we can literally call any function module in SAP, which means that I can get any information from the SAP system related to my content. And you can imagine yourself, if you have this content with metadata available in SharePoint, it's up to you. Start workflows, share content, and all these nice things that you can think about. Also, you can integrate, prepare content that later on should be linked to the corresponding SAP business objects. Invoice processing, receive invoices, scanning, email, whatsoever. Prepare, have your authorization available, concept available, so that you can go through the processes before you do something in SAP. So we really go here in both directions, with content and with data. I think that's very important. And we do this completely based on SAP standards. You see here from this image, that's so important, I think. We don't get to your company and do a lot of installations or changes to your SAP system. No, we use the SAP standard as is. We are certified for this one. And that's why we are very fast deployment and in addition, very flexible in your needs. That's something you will see hopefully later on, because as we are so keen on being standard, it is not a big issue for us to do maybe adaptations to your needs, because you don't have to change something changed. You start from the standard. And I think that's very important. So I mentioned that we have the document exchange and the data exchange in this picture here. Now, some technical benefits I mentioned already. We are certified. As we are so flexible, what I mentioned is that we can do a low-code configuration. For example, calling any function module in SAP, and then you have to, of course, link SAP information to the content information on your ECM or storage system, and that's what we do in a really JSON-like configuration. You will see that we are completely integrated. So we do not install anything on your SAP system. So you use SAP GUI, SAP Fiori, whatever you're using in your daily business. And this is, I think, a sweet spot. Nothing to install on the front end, just start working right away. With this future readiness, of course, we build our product to follow SAP. And SAP is not changing very often things, but if they do, it's important that you can follow. And our architecture and our whole product and thinking is around staying in line with SAP. The bi-directionality I mentioned, we can grab from outside forward to SAP or the other way around from SAP. We can get information to your storage system. And the standards I mentioned already very often, and you see that I'm a big fan of this one. Now, the usability is, of course, something that we always have in mind. We stay the user in their known environment, meaning you can stay in your SAP environment, do everything in SAP, but also we give you the option, of course, to go to SharePoint and use there your daily business, because SharePoint is so well integrated in your office environment. And therefore, I think it's a good idea to have the content there, including some SAP information. So you can stay in this environment, you can stay in SAP environment, and you will see that you also have the chance to switch. So you can jump from SharePoint towards SAP. As an example, if you need simply more SAP related information. And that's why we have our work for the business user in the known environment. We name it typically content in your context. Do not switch between systems. Stay in your environment where you are, get all necessary information, and just do your business or your job. Of course, last but not least, it's a small thing, but you can imagine having Power Automate on the SharePoint side. Very easy to automate processes. And we have also chances to forward, for example, processes that you started in SharePoint to SAP. So we can start also an SAP workflow based on a workflow on the SharePoint side. And this is a very old story, but I tell this since 25 years. I think it makes sense to have a single repository and not many repositories. And that's why we try to reduce. It's also from my experience, you never might have only ending up with one, but you should at least reduce to one to not too many from these repositories. Yes, here's our beautiful certification by SAP. I think it's important simply because of that. If you're certified by SAP for these scenarios, you can be sure that all of these scenarios are simply working smoothly because they have been tested by SAP. And in these tests is also some performance testing. So this is something I think is really important for you just to see. Yes, you get a kickstart because you start with SAP standard stuff, and this is certified. And there's only a few options. We come later to this one, but there, from a document point of view, we have an integration option. We call it attachment via the DMS of SAP, via archive link. Maybe one or the other integration option is known to you. We simply support all of them. Just a word on this one, attachments are getting more and more used in the Fiori environment. They are typically available for all business objects. And it's something about change documents, because it's possible to change also these documents that you attach to the business objects, which is a little bit different from archive link. Archive link is a quite old integration option, but I like it because it's very robust. And all around the world, I have seen in my life really billions of documents connected via archive link. With archive link, you do typically not have changeable documents. So it's possible to really have unchangeable documents, invoices, and all this stuff is typically archive link. And there are different scenarios like incoming documents, invoices, outgoing order confirmation, also print list archiving. And anyhow, also a little bit data archiving, but it's its own area. Last but not least, also DMS becomes a little bit more popular again now, because in Fiori environments, DMS is very often chosen. You have a document info record, also changeable documents, even versioning possible. Yeah, and also supported by us. I think for this today, we cannot show you everything, but here you get a clue on what is possible, what is supported. And also the data exchange, which is then on top of the standard integration scenarios. We can exchange the metadata to have, let me say like this, not a dump system behind SAP. In very many cases, it's absolutely okay to have really only an archive behind SAP, because SAP is leading, no doubt. But there are also documents that you might reuse. And exactly there, we can help you with a metadata exchange in bidirectional thing to get much more scenarios. Like I mentioned, you have a workflow, you can build an employee folder structure. There are so many options that you can do based on this scenario. Now, we have mentioned the different types that we do support. We have mentioned also here what you can do about all these different metadata exchange. And I mentioned also this low-code configuration, because I think it's interesting for you. We come with a solution that has pre-prepared templates. So it's really a fast start. And this is exactly what we want to offer to you. So if you're interested in, we will have our container deployed in your site. We do some configuration, no transport, just configuration on your SAP site or customizing, and something on the storage side, and that's it. And we can start. That's the cool thing with the templates. And if you need more, no problem. We have this chance to definitely go towards your needs. And the famous data archiving, where you really can reduce your costs, because we reduce grabbing information from your table space, put it to a file, delete it really in your table space, store it to S3, to SharePoint, still access this information from the archive in SAP, but at the end, you have a by far reduced SAP system landscape. And when you think about SAP HANA in memory database, I think it's a good idea to start with this as soon as possible. Now, I think that's enough about talking. Now let's come to the demonstration part. And typically, I like to start directly in SAP. Just think myself, let's start here. So the beautiful SAP screen. And I think most of you might know it, but there are many options how you can integrate. I talked about this a little bit before, but very important for every SAP business object. In this scenario, you see I have a material, a product in SAP. And then you have typically here the so-called services for object. This button is available in nearly all the business objects. So it's always the same. So if you do it once, you know how to handle the invoice, the purchase order, or plant maintenance, something, equipment. So the services for object has here some options. We want to create and store a business document, create attachment. We also support, I told you, but let's start with a very easy archive link scenario. So you get the chance, that's by the way something special of archive link, to choose a document type. So what do I want to attach to this material? In our case, we have here a material document to SharePoint Online. You will see later on how this looks like. So SharePoint Online, the document should be stored to. And here we see we have some test documents. You do an easy drag and drop from your desktop to the SAP GUI. Again, we do not have installed anything here on the front end, so you don't have to think about a rollout. You just do a drag and drop from your Explorer on your desktop, and you choose the document type that we have seen before, and you're done. So you upload the document in the background, and you have the chance typically to type in some kind of information. So we will test webinar. Let's name it 1 because we might store some additional documents. You are done. Select document type, drag and drop, done. I think it's so important because for an SAP user, they like it, they stay in their blue screen, everything is fine. So we did this task, quite easy. Let's go back again to the services for object and have a look to the attachment list. Of course, I did today already. That's my typical object that I'm using. And yes, we did some tests, and here is our webinar document. And you see that's the document that we stored right now. We have quite some information available. It's a question on the customizing on SAP side. And this information is then also available at a minimum on your SharePoint, for example. Now, obviously, you can display documents also, again, completely in SAP. The document viewer of SAP is coming up, and we can do some options here to this document. Typically, archive link, I told you, not changing, but for example, you have the chance here to add a note. So nothing fancy, but it's a cool thing, and I think it's good to have this option available by SAP. And again, here it's all no additional costs, by the way. Also, it's all in. Just want to mention that you see here, for example, that if you change the note, you see that who has created some notes. So you have a timestamp on this one. And by the way, this information is also stored to SharePoint. Now, I think that's it. We have seen very easy on how you handle content in SAP with my business object, so with my material in this case. I want to now guide you and say, yes, the SAP GUI is one option, but maybe there are additional options on the SAP side to go for what was the material that I've chosen before? Just I want to open the same one. No, that was the invoice. It was the material 18. So when we check here for our product, let's have a look here to the product on the Fiori side. Of course, it's the same. It's just another option on accessing this one. And why does it show me now so many? I was only asking for this one, yeah. And now the look and feel is obviously a little bit different because that's a Fiori standard app by SAP. But I just want to give you a little bit the feeling how this looks like. So we are here in our. It's hard for me now with this. Let's go down here. Here are the attachments, and here in this section of this product, we see that we can link here via the DMS option. You see here from the source, completely supported by us. We see also the archive link documents that I stored right now, as well as the GOS, it's the attachment services. So all of these kind of different options we do support. We can, of course, display also these documents on the Fiori side, as well as we can store documents. So this is where we have our document that we stored before. As well as I told you, we can also then, we are here in the change mode. So you can also add documents if you like in the Fiori app. So that's, I think, everything I wanted to show you here. Yeah, so we saw on handling documents in GUI, we saw handling documents in the Fiori app, and that we support all the different kind of business objects. Maybe that's the time where we first have a look to the SharePoint side. So in SharePoint, you remember, we exchange content in the background with our content services protocol, and we can also exchange some metadata. And how this can look like. So of course, it's a question on how you build your environment, how you want to utilize your documents. So one option, it's so easy to configure. We have a look here for SAP related documents. So there we will see on how we group this one. It's an example here in our demo environment. Typically, we talk about archive link documents. That was the first scenario that I showed you. And here you will find now quite some documents. And yeah, this does not look very sexy because, it's a strange number. So this is typically the way it looks like when SAP stores a document, because there's a unique identifier and is linked to the business object. But you remember, we do bidirectional data exchange. And because of the data, of course, we can group this, we can build views, we can search for this one, and simply here one option when you have here the different filters that we are using, and see, I have the chance to filter for materials or invoices. Just an example. So of course we can build whatever you like. And here are the two business objects we were talking about. I think I started here, for example, with the material number 1318. Yes, and here finally there are some documents. You see that it has not been replicated from the document that I did right now. The update of the index in SharePoint takes some time, so it will show up. Maybe we see at the end of the demo, but important, it will be updated. And then you have here the different kind of business information that is also related for SAP. You see, we have a lot of SAP information, which business object, client, blah, blah. So it's really all kind of information available that is coming from SAP. So of course we can search for this information. But in addition, there's also the chance, for example, to check for different information that is maybe not replicated, because I don't want to rebuild the SAP system here in your SharePoint. But when you have all these different kind of documents, I just want to check if this one where is it? No, am I on the wrong? No, it's okay. These are different documents that I wanted to show you here on the SharePoint side. Because I'm just thinking I want to show you also a scenario that points a little bit more towards S3. And in S3, of course, we do not have this user front end, this very well integration to the Office environment, which you have here. You can imagine now how to reuse these documents. We can also talk about data archiving. We are running so for the last quarter of an hour, and I do a fast pitch. And now it gets technical. Please be aware of this one, because I want to give you at least a short introduction to the data archiving also. First of all, we have a look to the invoice. This is an invoice that is obviously in the system, because I opened it, but let's do just once again. It's in year 2016. And when I open it, I get immediately this invoice. Clear thing. We can, of course, also store here a content. You will believe me. What I want to do now with you is I want to guide you to the data archiving environment, transaction Sarah, and I prepared a little bit. I do really now a data archive run. So I grab this invoice and push it to an external file and delete it from my SAP system. Therefore, I prepared something. I do this for, sorry, it's easier when I type. We go for an FI invoice document. No FI document. Where is it? Here, it's a financial accounting archiving object that really all SAP standard, no additional costs you can use. And when we have chosen this archiving object, you see that we have some additional actions available. First of all, I want to grab the information from the SAP system and store it to a flat file that we later on then store to the archive. And therefore, you need a variant to choose which type of information. So I prepared something, and just that you see that I do a very easy thing. I really grab only one invoice. I take with the number 7 at the end from the year 16. That's it. I just want to archive one single FI invoice, because I don't want to archive all of them, then I don't have a demo system anymore. That's why that's enough. And you believe that I can do this one. I do the start date immediately. And that's it. We can execute and have a check what is happening in the SAP system. Here's my spool. You see, I have submitted a write job. Currently, I set up after writing, it will be stored. So when I do a refresh, it happens. You see, the write job has been finished. The storing has already been finished. So it has been moved to S3 already. And last but not least, the deletion will run out of the archive. That's the most secure way you can do, because you know the data is in the archive. I check if the data in the archive corresponds with the data in the table space in SAP. If so, then delete the table space. Refreshing again. We are done. Of course, it was only one FI invoice. If you run there thousands of documents, it might take a little bit longer. But you see, we did all from the write, storage, and delete. And just that you can check this here in a job log just to have this one seen. And we see, yes, we selected one document and we archived one document. And that's it, very fast. Just I want to show you how this looks like from an archiving point of view. So where is the file? And therefore, I give you one technical hint. I have to do that because in the customizing, I just want to tell you why this has been running so smooth. And where is it? This one, I think. Here you see that I have in the customizing in the background that we move it to the repository S3, so our AWS S3 storage, and we do everything automatically. We store it, we delete it. The storage to the storage system to S3 is also automatically, and we store before deleting. And the deletion program reads out of the storage system. That's the hardest thing you can do, but it's also the most secure thing. This was just a short information for you how and why this went so fast. And last but not least, let's have a look here to the management system, because there is now the file, the data archive, which is not in SAP anymore, but in S3. And this one is the last run you see for our system. And when you have a really close look on this archive run, we see that the document is stored in the archive. Sorry, not the document, the archive file. That this has really been deleted out of the SAP database. And the archive file is accessible via archive link, not in an Exchange directory, because we really stored it to S3. And this is the only place where it's available right now. So technically, we are well done, very fast. And I just want to give you here the chance to have a look how this looks now on the financial side, because that's quite cool. When I go back here again and open this document again in SAP, it is still possible. It takes maybe a little bit longer because it is not in a database anymore. But now you see here below, there's the hint that the document has already been archived. And of course, you can't change this anymore. So for financial content or documents, it's perfectly integrated to SAP. We support this one from AcquiPro and storing this to S3 or to SharePoint or to any other place. But I'm also fair to mention that this option is not available for all SAP business objects. So finance is very well equipped. But something that I can show you what is available for all of these business objects is the so-called Archive Explorer. So we go to the transactions SARI, which is the Archive Information System or the Archive Explorer. And when we have here, look, you remember we have our archiving object. We filled an archive infrastructure. And when we have a look to this infrastructure, we will find, I didn't archive too many, so that's why it's easy. I can select, here are all my documents. This is the document that we stored right now. And when we have here a closer look to this invoice that actually is not in the database anymore, you see that I have now the option of the single document display, which we saw before already. That's the transaction. And we have also the technical view. And just give me one second to show you, yes, the technical view is technical, but you get everything that you need. So you get your header information, and when you check there, of course, you can dig and get every information that you're looking for. So this access option is always available. By the way, you can also even report the archive. Because I see that we are coming closer to the end, the last thing that I didn't show you up to now was, I think, the S3. And of course, you should see that, yes, it's really an S3. Of course, it's not sexy, because in S3 you find all your information, but not as beautiful as you see typically in SharePoint. We have here our archive link documents or attachments. And here's a special area for data archiving, which you can do as a warm archive that so is not changeable when you stored it once. And here we are. Here is actually our information. Let me say, these are the data archive files that we grabbed from SAP. They are really small because it was only one business object. But you can imagine if you have there millions of business objects, these can grow bigger, but typically are separated in many chunks, like 100 megabyte files. So I don't want to get too technical, but you should have one scene. Yes, it's easy. Also, the S3 integration for content or for data that you never will access other than with SAP. Yes, S3 is a perfect option. It's a straightforward, I think it's the cost-efficient way of doing that. If you have content that you want to reuse, SharePoint is a beautiful option because you can integrate perfectly in your daily business. And now this leaves us at least 8 minutes for question and answer. So I stop here, and yeah, I'm happy to go for any questions if there are some.
Well, that was awesome. Thank you, Volker.
Yeah, thank you.
And I just thought I'd start with a quick question while Shelley kind of pulls up some of these other questions. You had mentioned that the FI document was reaccessible through SAP, and that not all document types are. Could you elaborate on that? I think that there's maybe 30 or 35 that can be reaccessed, but maybe you can shed some more light on that.
Absolutely. So you're correct. So SAP offers a few of them. As you saw before, it's beautiful. The index is built in the background, and then you can retrieve them in the transactions where you're used to get access to these kind of information, but not for all. And if you see that we talk about thousands compared to 30, 60, yes, it's really not for all of them. But actually, you are typically not searching so much, or let me say, accessing these documents. It's more for the financial authorities. And therefore, there are cool tools available. As I mentioned, you can do reporting. There's Start, where you can store your data already external for the authorities. So there are so many options, really, and this is all in SAP standard. No additional tool in combination with our approach. You're ready to go and can really do a big chunk of your getting rid of your data in your database.
Excellent. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, both of you. Let me go over, we do have a couple of questions, and for the rest of you on this call, if you have questions, please put them in the chat box now. The first question I have is, how is this offering bundled and delivered?
Yeah, sure. I'll take kind of an initial stab at that, and then Volker, if you want to kind of elaborate. So the way that we deploy it is as a containerized deployment. The thought is that we would likely, so I would guess that most customers are in one of the cloud environments. So either Rise with SAP or an Amazon Web Services or Azure. So generally speaking, the thought is that we would want to deploy this in that same environment and get the infrastructure as probably we would deploy it as a virtual private cloud inside the customer's tenant. And the reason for that is we want to be as close as to the SAP environment as possible. And that way it just reduces the amount of ingress and egress, right? So we don't want to be out over a wire. So generally speaking, the idea would be deploy in the customer's cloud and kind of, you know, directly in the tenant where the SAP environment is. Volker, did you want to talk maybe a little bit more about the implementation piece and how that would work as well?
Just, I think perfect. You covered mostly. Just talk a little bit about SAP. Yes, in SAP you have to do some customizing. There's transaction OEC 0 to point to the external address where SAP is communicating with, and then you do some customizing either in data archiving, in archive link. Of course, you have to prepare a little bit the SAP system, but it's really a very small thing, and we can have extremely fast results as long as you stay in the beautiful SAP standard environment.
Excellent. Yeah.
Awesome. Our next question here is if you could please describe the pricing options.
Yeah, sure. So, you know, as we kind of mentioned out of the top of the gate, we're offering a promotion for Q1, Q2. The typical prototype is usually around 10,000 US, but we're waiving that for customers during this special promotion who want to do a prototype in their environment for Q1, Q2. The pricing this is a subscription-based price. So what we would do is provide you with a 3-year term license and with the ability to renew for an additional 3-year extension after that with you know, some sort of uplift. The way that we calculate the initial price is based on that ROI analysis, but it is a very simple price, and obviously with the goal of providing immediate value and a return on investment with the application implementation and services being paid for within the first 6 months. So happy to, I think Volker's got our email addresses up here, but happy to work with customers and, you know, kind of hustle through that ROI analysis and provide the pricing, and again, with a focus on paying for the application, full return on investment in around a 6-month time period. Volker, any other thoughts on that?
Oh, perfectly covered already.
Okay.
Get it, because it's really a cool stuff to get this for low, but nothing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you both for sharing all of this great information and for such a great demonstration. I don't have any more questions right now, so I'd just like to take this opportunity again to say thank you so much for being here with us today. We'll be sharing the recording of this webinar later on. And again, reach out to them. The contact information is up on the screen. I'm happy to provide you with any additional information that you need. And until next time, we'll see you. Have a good day.
Thank you, Shelley.
You.
Thank you, Volker.
Perfect
Thank you.
hosting. Thank you, Shep.
Okay, bye-bye. Thanks for attending, everyone. Bye-bye.